In 1987, a tax lawyer in the German city of Ulm died at the age of 82. He had a practice, a reputation, clients who trusted him with their money. Neighbors knew him as a quiet man. He had lived through the war, like everyone his age, and he did not talk about it much. His name was Gerhard Klopfer. 45 years earlier, he had sat at a table in a lakeside villa outside Berlin and helped agree the administrative framework for killing 11 million people. He was never convicted of anything. The case against him was dropped in 1962 for lack of evidence. He filed tax returns for another 25 years and died in his own bed. 15 men attended that meeting. It lasted about 90 minutes. There was brandy afterwards. And when you follow all 15 of them forward through the next 4 decades, what you find is not a story about punishment. It is a story about how few of them were ever touched at all. Before we get into it, subscribe to the channel. These are the stories that get skipped over, and every subscriber helps keep them from disappearing. Am Großen Wannsee, 5658. Cell. A confiscated villa in a wealthy suburb southwest of Berlin, with tall windows facing a lake that had frozen over. Cars pulled up through the snow. 15 men went inside and hung up their coats. The date was 20 January 1942, and the timing tells you something. 6 weeks earlier, German forces had been thrown back from Moscow. In December, the United States entered the war. The Reich had just lost its chance at a short victory, and its leadership responded by devoting its most senior administrators to a full morning spent on the logistics of extermination. The man who called the meeting was Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office. He came holding a letter from Hermann Göring, giving him authority to coordinate what the regime called the final solution to the Jewish question. Here is the detail that most retellings get wrong. Wannsee was not the meeting where the killing was decided. The killing had already been running for 6 months. Since the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, mobile SS units had followed the army east and shot Jewish civilians town by town. At Kamianets-Podilsky in August, more than 23,000 people were killed over 2 days. At the Babyn Yar ravine outside Kyiv at the end of September, the recorded figure was 33,771 in the same span of time. In Odessa, in Riga, in Minsk, the pattern repeated. Communities that had existed for centuries were gone inside a week, and their property was inventoried and redistributed. By the winter, the men running this had a problem. Not a moral one, a practical one. Shooting people was slow. It used ammunition the army wanted. It needed men who could do it face to face, hundreds of times, and the SS was finding those men drank heavily, broke down, and stopped functioning. So the regime wanted a method that was faster, cheaper, and further away from the eyes of the people carrying it out. The first fixed killing site at Chelmno was already operating with sealed trucks. Bełżec, Sobibor, and Treblinka were being built or planned. Heydrich did not need permission for any of that. What he needed was for every ministry, every rival department, and every occupation authority to stop obstructing him and start cooperating. That is what the villa was for. The men in the room were not the ones who did the shooting. They were the ones who controlled the pieces Heydrich needed: the legal definitions, the railways, the occupied territories, the police apparatus, the party machinery, and the budget. Heydrich opened by summarizing policy. Forced emigration was finished. The new approach was evacuation to the east. Every man there understood what that phrase covered. He set out the shape of it. Jews fit for labor would be sent east in work columns, separated by sex, and a large proportion of them would die in the course of the work. Those who survived would represent, in his framing, a resilient remainder that would have to be dealt with accordingly, because releasing them would allow the community to rebuild. Nobody in the room used the word murder. The whole exercise was conducted in the language of administration. Adolf Eichmann had prepared the numbers. He had tables listing Jewish populations country by country across the entire continent, including places the Reich did not control: Britain, Spain, Sweden, Ireland. The total came to 11 million. The discussion that took the most time was not about killing. It was about definitions. Wilhelm Stuckart, who had co-written the Nuremberg race laws, wanted to settle the question of people with 1 or 2 Jewish grandparents. He proposed dissolving mixed marriages by decree and sterilizing the children. Heydrich disagreed on the detail, and the matter was deferred to later meetings. Josef Bühler, deputy governor of occupied Poland, made a request. He wanted the operation to start in his territory first. His argument was logistical. The Jewish population there was already concentrated. The transport distances were short, and there was no rail bottleneck. He was asking to move his region to the front of the queue. Then it ended. Servants brought food and drink. The men talked, smoked, and left. Eichmann said later, under interrogation in Israel, that the atmosphere in the room had surprised him. He had expected resistance, or at least discomfort, from the civil servants who were not part of the SS. He got neither. What he remembered was how relaxed everyone was once the formal part was over. Senior officials from ministries with no police function at all, standing around with drinks, entirely at ease with what had just been agreed. That is worth sitting with. The men Heydrich most needed to convince were the ones who required no convincing. Eichmann wrote the minutes. 30 copies. 29 were destroyed. One survived in captured German Foreign Office files and was found by an American prosecutor in 1947. Without that single copy, this meeting would have left almost no trace at all. Heydrich had 4 months left. On 27 May 1942, 2 Czechoslovak agents trained in Britain intercepted his open-topped car on a bend in a Prague suburb. He survived the ambush itself and died on 4 June from infection. The reprisals were designed as spectacle. The village of Ledisi was destroyed, its men shot, its women and children deported. Ležáky was erased the same way. Heydrich got a state funeral and never saw the inside of a courtroom. Rudolf Lang was the man in the villa with the most direct experience of the killing. He had commanded operations in Latvia before Wannsee and was there to explain what worked in the field. By February 1945, he was defending Poznań against the Red Army. He died there, almost certainly by his own hand. Alfred Meyer, second in command at the Ministry for the Occupied Eastern Territories, killed himself in April 1945 as the Reich collapsed. Roland Freisler ran the People's Court, where he screamed at defendants and signed thousands of death sentences for offenses as minor as a remark in a bar. On 3 February 1945, an American air raid struck Berlin while he was in session. The court building took a hit, and a falling masonry column killed him. The defendant whose file he had been holding survived the raid and survived the war. Heinrich Müller ran the Gestapo. He was last confirmed in the Berlin bunker at the start of May 1945. After that, nothing. No body identified, no confirmed grave, no verified sighting anywhere. West German authorities searched for years and declared him dead in 1961. He is the most senior figure of the regime whose fate was never established. Martin Luther of the Foreign Ministry was undone by the regime itself. He moved against his own minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, in 1943, lost, and was sent to Sachsenhausen, imprisoned by the machine he had helped operate. He was freed at the end of the war and died of heart failure within weeks. Out of 15 men, 3 were executed. Karl Eberhard Schongart commanded SS security police in occupied Poland and had run killing operations there. The British caught him and put him before a military court, but not for any of that. The charge was the killing of 1 captured Allied airman. That was the case they had documented, so that was the case they brought. He was hanged at Hameln Prison on 16 May 1946. Josef Bühler, the man who had asked to go first, was handed to Poland. He was tried in Krakow, sentenced, and then he asked for clemency. His wife petitioned as well. Every request was refused. He was executed in August 1948. Adolf Eichmann was the youngest man at the table and did the most work afterwards. He built the transport system, the schedules, the rolling stock, the quotas, negotiated country by country with governments across Europe. When it ended, he escaped through Italy to Argentina and worked at a Mercedes-Benz plant outside Buenos Aires under the name Ricardo Clement. Israeli operatives took him from a street near his home in May 1960 and flew him to Jerusalem. His trial was recorded and broadcast, and survivors testified in public with the man who had signed the orders sitting in a glass booth a few meters away. He was hanged on 1 June 1962. His body was burned, and the ashes scattered in the Mediterranean beyond Israeli waters, so that there would never be a grave for anyone to visit. That leaves 6. Wilhelm Stuckart wrote the laws that stripped German Jews of citizenship and made the rest legally possible. At Nuremberg, he was sentenced to just under 4 years, which the court counted as already served in custody. He walked out, worked in West Germany, and died in a road accident in 1953. Gerhard Klopfer, the tax lawyer from the opening of this story, represented the party chancellery and was among the most senior officials present. Proceedings against him were dropped in 1962. He died in 1987. Georg Leibrandt of the Eastern Territories Ministry was arrested, investigated, and had his case closed in 1950. He lived until 1982. Otto Hoffmann ran the SS Race and Settlement main office. Nuremberg gave him 25 years. He served 6, was released in 1954, and died in 1982. Erich Neumann, State Secretary for the 4-year plan, was released from custody in 1948 on medical grounds and died later that year. Friedrich Wilhelm Kritzinger of the Reich Chancellery is the only one of the 15 who ever expressed regret. He testified after the war, said he was ashamed of what the regime had done, and died in 1947 without charge. There is a pattern in those 5 outcomes, and it is not accidental. The men who were hanged were the ones who had run territory or signed transport orders, the ones whose names appeared on operational documents. The men who walked were the ones who had worked on definitions, on law, on party coordination. Their contribution was upstream of the killing, and upstream contributions are difficult to prosecute. A signature on a race law is not a signature on a death warrant, even when the first one makes the second one possible. By the early 1950s, West Germany also needed civil servants, lawyers, and administrators to rebuild itself, and there were not many available who had no history at all. Prosecutions slowed, cases were closed, sentences were commuted. So the final count reads like this: 3 hanged, 4 dead by their own hand or in the ruins of the Reich, 1 who disappeared, 1 killed by his own government, 1 killed by an Allied bomb, and 5 men who went through the post-war process and came out the other side to practice law, hold jobs, raise families, and grow old in the country they had helped destroy. The villa is a memorial and an education center now. You can stand where the table stood and look out at the same water. What sits badly about that room is not that it held monsters, it is that it held administrators. Every one of those men could have gone his whole life as a competent, unremarkable official. What the regime asked of them was not cruelty, it was cooperation, a signature, a rail allocation, a legal definition, a budget line. None of them had to watch anything. That was the entire point of the meeting. They were building a system that put distance between the decision and the death, so that the people making the decisions would never have to see the result and could go on functioning normally. It worked. Most of them went on functioning normally for the rest of their lives. And the only reason we can name any of them is that one clerk somewhere failed to burn the last copy. If this stayed with you, subscribe before you go. Names like these only stay on the record because people keep looking at them.